Hello again, Booktube. I'm Mike, and this is RiffRaff's Reading Renaissance. In this Booktube season of reading what I own and people with self-imposed book buying bans, what did I do? Well, I did a massive book haul, one of the biggest book hauls I've done. Why did I do this? Well, I've been very busy of late, work and other commitments, and it's been a long while since I've managed to visit our local charity shops that are associated to either the hospice or the SPCA. The stars aligned this morning, and I decided I was going to go and see what I had been missing. When I got to the shop, to my surprise, there was an announcement, but today only, everything was half price. Now, to understand the context of this, I mean, the most expensive book in the shop is the equivalent of about $2 US. And many of the books are priced at what we would call R1, but in fact, that's 5 US cents. So the books are dirt cheap. And today they were twice as dirt cheap. I had a wonderful few hours trawling through the shop. And at the end, I spent the equivalent of a grand total of $20. But how many books did I get? Well, I don't know. I thought, why should Steve Donoghue have all the unboxing fun? So I thought, let me make the first official ever RiffRaff's Reading Renaissance unboxing book haul video. So come with me and let's see what books I got and how many I got. The very observant of you will see behind me that a space has been cleared next to my coffee cup. That's not for random reasons. There are 4 big bags of shopping to unpack. I kid you not. I found a lot of interesting books. There are obviously books that you wouldn't pay full price for, but at the price, these ridiculously low prices, you think, well, why not? Let's give this book a good home, just as you want the funds to go to give the animals a good home at the SPCA bookshop. So the stars aligned, as I said. So come along and let's see what I got. So here we have one massive shopping bag full of books, another shopping bag full of books, and a third one full of books, and finally a fourth shopping bag. 4 big bags of books to go through. This is going to be interesting. We'll have to clear some space as we go, but let's see how it all works. Okay, totally randomly, let us take down the first bag and see what we've got. I'm pulling literally randomly out of the bag as we go. Here we have Marilyn French's The Woman's Room. I was very impressed recently, having read Marilyn French's book on Shakespeare from a gender perspective, and I was reminded that I don't have a copy of her book, The Woman's Room, and this book was the equivalent of 25 US cents. So it found its home with me. Next up is a novel by Ian Pearce called The Dream of Scipio. Now, I don't know this novel at all, but I do know that Steve Donoghue has recommended Ian Pearce, if I get the name right, An Instance of the Finger Post is the novel which Steve has said we should all read because it's fantastic. And I have that novel, but I haven't got around to it yet. This book was the princely sum again of 25 US cents. So I thought, it's coming along. If he's that good in the one book, he's probably quite good in his other books. Emily at M. Reads was asking if we know any more books by Colleen McCulloch, because she read The Thornbirds recently and enjoyed it so much. I did not know anything about other books by Colleen McCulloch, but today I found one. It's called An Indecent Obsession. Again, same price, 25 cents, 5 Rand in our local currency. And I thought, well, why not? Why not? Let's give it a good home and see if we enjoy the read. At those prices, it's a relatively low risk. Then I found a book called Poemscapes. It's a South African compilation, Notes and Activities by Robin Millan from Oxford University Press. So to complement my poetry collection. Next up, The Plays of Sheridan, And again, 25 cents. And if you look at the contents, you can see, if you're very sharp-eyed, but if not, I'll read you. The Rivals, St. Patrick's Day, The Duenna, The Trip to Scarborough, The School for Scandal, The Camp, The Critic, and Pizarro. They're all in here. 25 cents. I do feel a little bit like the kid who got the Christmas morning present. Here's another compilation of poetry by Robin Mullen, also from Oxford University Press. The focus of this one is on world poetry as opposed to the more local poetry in the first edition. So that's the first bag. Let's reach for another bag. Oh, heavy stuff. Here's Robert Harris's Fatherland, which just yesterday I watched Mark at Book Time with Elvis talk about the fact that he'd acquired a copy of this book. I've heard good things about Robert Harris. And again, this was 25 cents. So what can you do? Next from the bag, I pulled Ivor Brown's book, How Shakespeare Spent the Day. I'm sure I don't have to tell you after my enjoyment in engaging in the Shakespeare event why this book would leap out to me. This book was the whole princely sum of 50 US cents, or 10 Rand in our local currency, but that was certainly not enough to slow me down and say it shouldn't come home with us. And here's one called Modern South African Stories, edited by Stephen Gray, who's well known here. The authors, if I look at the back, are all well-known South African names. Nadine Gordimer is here, Alan Payton, and lots of local guys, which I always like to see. Christopher Hope's here as well, Peter Dirk Ace, Barney Simon from the theatre world, and lots of names, which I think I'm a sucker for these collections, because if someone's more skilled than I has done the anthologizing, then I'm grateful to be the beneficiary of that. Here's a book called When a Crocodile Eats the Sun by Peter Godwin. This was another book priced at 50 US cents or 10 local rand. This is about the declining days of Zimbabwe, which is a story I'm always interested to read more about. So I will read that with interest. I had seen that book for a while and wasn't sure I'd get it at full price. But when it jumps out at you at that sort of price, it really makes the decision for you. I'm a big fan of Ian McEwan, and one of the books I haven't got of his is on Chesil Beach. I've heard people say different things. Some love it, some don't love it. And again, when it's sitting there for 25 cents, you think, well, it's worth the gamble. Let's take it along and see whether I love it or not. Jennifer Saunders' book called Bonkers, My Life in Laughs. Those of you who know Jennifer Saunders will know why she's worth understanding a little bit more about. She's a simply brilliant comedian on the English television screens. And these are the books that I always want to read, and I always stop myself from spending full price because I can't justify it. But this one again was 50 US cents, 10 local rands. So home it came. And you can see immediately why I bought this book. Anyone who saw my videos from Framed in September, where I focused on the book about the girl with the pearl earring and Vermeer's painting and the films and the documentaries around it, when I saw this book, it literally leapt out at me. It's called The Music Lesson. I know less than nothing about it. It was the whole 25 cents. It says on the back, wonderful, a super book that tells a dynamic and tightly controlled story in prose, sensual with the smell of things, the feel of things, always one step ahead of the reader and genuinely surprising. It's a very telling treatise on how we experience the world, ourselves, the objects and people in it. That quote comes from Kate Atkinson. That's one of those quotes that tells you precisely nothing about what the book's about. Muriel Sparks says it's very moving, at times terrifying and thoroughly gripping. Passion for Dutch paintings of the 17th century is one of the few pleasures available to Patricia Dolan, a 41-year-old research librarian at the Frick Collection in New York. Her policeman father raised her to believe deeply in the cause of a united Ireland, but her Irishness has always, until now, simply existed as heritage and identity. Then Michael O'Driscoll, an unknown cousin from County Cork, seeks her out. He is young, beguiling, seductive, and an active member of an IRA splinter group. Very intriguing. One of my ancestors was an activist somewhere in the IRA, I believe. I don't know enough about it to be culpable, but but anyway, there it is. We'll have to report back on what that book's all about. But I will confess, I did judge a book by its cover. Now, the big guy in the bottom of this bag that was holding the others up is a heavy tome. This would have qualified for the recent video I did on the big books. It's called The Best of South African Short Stories. And it's got one of those lovely picture covers with a little bit of everything. There's the lion. There's what looks like one of the Boers with a rifle. The horizon of the city of gold, the railways, horses, a Taj Mahal there, just showing the melting pot of cultures we have, and an interracial couple dancing. There we go. Maybe it's a bit of a modern reflection. This massive tome was the pricey sum of 50 cents US, 10 Rand local. And if I flip open randomly, I see Nadine Gordimer's story, The Train from Rhodesia. That's obviously a dated reference. It looks fascinating. A whole series of stories, both I'm sure some well-known and some less, with some lovely illustrations. There's a picture not of the Chattanooga choo-choo, but of the Outeniqua choo-choo, because this part of the country is referred to as Outeniqua. All right, so this will be a book I need to spend a little bit more time with to really understand what exactly I've acquired. But at that price, it wasn't going to be left on the shelves, I'm afraid. So, 2 bags down. Here's the 3rd bag. And let's continue our little quest to see what else leapt out at me at this sale. This is Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. Now, I've heard people, no one feels gently about this book. People are either committed to it or loathe it with a passion. And I have to say, that's always stopped me in the past from spending real money on it. I think it was 5 Rand or 25 US cents. And I thought at that price, I might as well have it with me, because I would like to be able to reference it occasionally and dip into it when people talk about it. Here's a copy of J.M. Coetzee's Disgrace. This is probably his most famous South African novel, which won the Booker Prize. It's a grim read, but then it's writing about an aspect of South African life that's not easy, but it is astoundingly good. It's probably the novel that made J.M. Coetzee's reputation as an internationally respected and renowned author. So 25 cents, have to come along. Here's Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. I'm sure several of you heard about it. Trevor Noah is one of the most successful exports in recent years from South Africa. He's a wonderful guy, a stand-up comedian who's become a television presenter, and he took over the Daily Show from Jon Stewart when Jon Stewart stepped down after a long tenureship. And there was lots of questions about whether this uppity kid from South Africa would make good. And I think he has. He's really won the American public over with his skill, his personality, and his balanced approach to life. This book, if you haven't read it, is an extraordinary book. It's called Born a Crime because Trevor had a black mother and a Swiss white father. And the fact that combination produced an offspring was in fact itself a crime in South Africa at the time. So it's a brilliant title, and although it's ironic, it's not untrue. And the life he has lived, I won't spoil it for those of you who haven't read it, but it is amazing in lots of aspects, absolutely amazing. And it's a brilliantly clever, funny read. As only Trevor Noah would do. So I can't recommend it strongly enough. I have read it, but I saw a copy here for these ridiculous prices, and I thought I'll take it along because I'll find someone soon who hasn't read it. Here's a John le Carré that I wasn't very familiar with, and at these ridiculous prices I thought I've never heard a bad word about John le Carré, so it can come along home until I get a chance to get to that particular John le Carré. This book I don't know much about. It's called The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, but what caught my eye is it's labeled as The Sensation That Ignited Twin Peaks. Now, I remember the television series Twin Peaks, which was much talked about and quite controversial in its own way. So I thought, well, that's another interesting read. Let me have a little look. And again, the prices were beyond ridiculous. So it came along too. And Here's Douglas Adams, The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul. Now, I recently did a video on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy tag that Gareth had set up. But in fact, I'd mentioned in that, I read the Hitchhiker series a long time ago, and my memory, if I'm right, is that I then went on to read the Dirk Gently series, of which I think there are two. One's called The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul. Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, that's the other one. I read them both, and I think my memory is that I actually preferred the Dirk Gently novels to the Hitchhiker's Guide. But anyway, I haven't seen a copy of it for donkey's years. There it was at next to nothing. So it came home with me. Next up, another one of these John le Carre's I'm not terribly familiar with, but the sense I have with le Carre's, you really can't go wrong. And these nice little paperbacks are just sort of chuck in a bag and take with you on a holiday or a trip, and they're not precious copies. So it's in that sense that I thought it made sense. The next up is Popcorn by Ben Elton. Now, Ben Elton is a writer who intrigues me because he's just, by the way, issued an autobiography called What Have I Done? Which I haven't been able to get hold of yet. It's literally just been released in October, but I'm very keen to read it. Ben Elton has been involved in an awful lot of the fantastic comedy that's come out of the UK. Perhaps the most famous is Blackadder, where he was very much involved. And I listened to a podcast of him talking about this autobiography the other day, and I thought, wow, I really want to read this because he's rubbed shoulders with all the greats, from Rowan Atkinson, Brian Blessed, on and on and on. And I thought that would be a fascinating read. But I was also aware that I haven't read much, if anything, of Ben Elton's actual sort of novel work as opposed to comedy TV script work. And the one that keeps popping into my radar is Ben Elton's Popcorn. And here it was, again, at a giveaway price. So I thought, let me pick that up and discover a little bit more about what I think about it, whether Ben Elton's writing is as good as his comedy writing for television. The next one up is called Don't Let's Go to the Dogs Tonight by Alexandra Fuller. It is an African childhood, it says, and this is about a girl who grew up in Rhodesia, what's now Zimbabwe. And if I read the back, it's about going through as a child, growing up and coming to the realization that the side you have been fighting for may well be the wrong one. Anyone who's lived in the southern part of Africa, this is a very realistic and very relatable sense of growing up naive and eventually becoming aware that things ain't right, and going through the self-doubt of saying, how aware should one be? How much of it is your fault when you have organizations and regimes trying to manage information away from you and feed you lines of interpretation and narrative to suit them, not you, which is, by the way, why I've grown up with such a passionate loathing of censorship. I absolutely loathe censorship. But let me park that discussion here. I really do want to do a video on the issue of banning books in the context of the South African apartheid era. I think it's worth a video, but it needs a little bit more work. Anyway, so against that context, I saw here, I don't know Alexander Fuller, but I recognize the concept of this story, and I thought, yeah, that could be very interesting. So another one on the TBR. It never stops. This was a sort of hippie throwback. It's called Perv, A Love Story by Jerry Stahl. And it says on the back, set in 1970 in the last dark days of hippiedom, Perv, A Love Story is the saga of Bobby Stark, a 16-year-old batch of desire and angst struggling to stay sane in a world gone dayglow. I'm always a bit of a sucker for people who write stories about growing up in the same era that I grew up. And that's really why I thought I'd try this. I think it's a bit of a hit and miss. I have no idea whether it's any good. I'll let you know when I eventually get to try it. But that's why it jumped out and came at these ridiculous prices. And the next one is an autobiography that I've looked at a few times and not bought at full price. And that's Miriam Margolyes, who I find always fantastically entertaining. and gorgeously politically incorrect. She has no filter at all. She tells you exactly what she thinks, and you normally end up rolling on the floor laughing at the amusing way with which she looks at the world. And this, I think, if I'm correct, is I think her second autobiography. I think she's written one before, but this is called This Much Is True. It's either the first or the second, I'm not sure. I don't own either, so I mean, I can read you, there's just rave reviews on the inside from everybody you can imagine, telling you how funny and how good this is. So, when it's at bargain basement prices, it makes the cut. Similarly, this book called Fever Pitch by Nick Hornby. Now, I'm a big fan of High Fidelity, which is Nick Hornby's music-related novel. This is his football-related novel. Now, football's not a passion of mine particularly. South African rugby, of course, is more my taste. But I understand the passion of football, particularly in the UK. And I understand this is a very good novel. I've never sort of chosen or sought it out before, but here it was at next to nothing, and I thought, let's see if Nick Hornby's as good at writing about football as he was about writing about music, which I really enjoyed. Then there was an Ian McEwan called Solar. My understanding of this one and the name Solar is it's a sort of futuristic book in which the climate issues are real. That's the kind of thing I've understood about this book from reading the blurb and the back cover. I do like Ian McEwan. I think he's an exceptionally good writer. Those of you with good memories will remember that I read his book Cockroach, his anti-Brexit book, which is a pastiche or a takeoff of Kafka's Metamorphosis, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. So I thought, why not give it a chance? The next book is called Homeland, and it's obviously a local one by an author called Karen Brinard, who I don't know at all, but when I saw that it was a South African story, Captain Albertus Beeslaar has had enough of the Kalahari. You immediately know it's a South African story. And I have a soft spot for supporting South African authors. I think it's hard for them to get the same airtime as perhaps their European or American compatriots. So again, when I saw it sitting there, I thought, let me give this a try. And I'll report back, as I have done, as you know, with Damon Galgut, who's I think is one of the greatest authors around today, bar none. So I'll let you know indeed. And then this next one that comes out of this big bag is called The Cellist of Sarajevo by Stephen Galloway. Now, I have to tell you, I don't know anything about the book at all, but I do know some of the stories from my music interest about the concept of musicians in Sarajevo. With the troubles that were raging in Sarajevo, some very brave musicians took to playing music in the street amongst the rubble, which of course was enormously dangerous to themselves, but massively uplifting to those who were trying to survive in the bombing and the devastation that was going all around them. And immediately I saw this, I was intrigued enough to know, is this a fictionalization of the story that I heard as a true factual story? I was reading something written by Pete Seeger, the folk singer, and he was referencing, I forget the name of the Sarajevan musician. It was a cellist, but I forget his name. I'll put it here once I edit the video. But Pete Seeger was singing the praises of this brave activist musician playing live in the middle of the rubble, in the middle of the raging war. And there was too much coincidence here for me to say, maybe I won't take this book with me. I really do want to unpack what this is about, whether it's the same story or a parallel story or a story inspired by the realities, or too intriguing to leave it behind when it's sitting there at literally next to nothing. And the last one in this bag is by William Boyd, and it's called Solo. Now, I have some books by William Boyd. Our Man in Africa, I think, is the one that jumps to mind. But this particular book didn't do anything for me until I saw what's written at the bottom. It says, a James Bond novel. Now, I thought, oh, this is one of these guys who's had a go at out Ian Fleming. And I thought, in the spirit of Dr. November, which we're now into November, so it's real live, I thought, I can't leave this behind. I have to take it home. whether I'll get to it or not, because I have a long pile of Dr. November related reading to do, and the priorities. I've finished reading the Quiet American, which is the group read, and I have started on The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which is my immediate priority. I'm also reading Frederick Forsyth's autobiography called The Outsider as a sort of background reading. And I mean, my pile is just massive. It includes, the Len Dayton's Game, Set and Match trilogies. It goes on and on. Anyway, once I saw that William Boyd had a go at a James Bond novel at these ridiculous prices, I'm afraid I thought, we need to be aware of that. We need to understand whether he pulled it off or not. Okay, 3 bags down and 1 monumental big bag still to go. Let's see if I can get this bag down without doing myself a damage. Just sitting right on the top is this massive hardcover. Now this is, you can see, this is a book that's been around a bit. It's been a bit bashed, and again, it was priced, it's a solid hardcover priced at 50 cents, and it is James Michener's The Covenant. Now, The Covenant, for those who don't know, is the Michener book that deals with the whole story of South Africa. The Covenant being the religious undertaking made by the Afrikaners, in their view, with God, about how they would manage their affairs going forward in this wild country that they were trying to take control of. So I have a small, thick doorstopper paperback, one of those that's thicker than it's tall, which I had bought of The Covenant. But when I looked at this, and I thought, it's so much easier to read. It's nice, it's big, it's solid, and it perhaps is one of those books that you want to keep if you're a South African with an interest in this story. So again, it jumped the queue and got into the pile. I'm going to put that there because I suspect we may need a third pile here. The next one out of the bag is Olivia Manning's Fortunes of War. It's part 1 of the Balkan trilogy. You'll see on the cover there, it's Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson. A young Kenneth Branagh and young Emma Thompson. I think they were married at the stage of this, when this television series was made. But I remember seeing the television series when I was growing up, and it blew me away. I absolutely loved both Branagh and Thompson, and I loved this story. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. And I have recently acquired the second book, but now I have acquired the first book too. So my trilogy, strangely enough, it's in 2 books, but it's now complete. So that was the real win. And of course, at absurd prices, just makes it even sweeter. The next book up is Last Exit to Brooklyn. This is a book I've sort of heard bits and pieces about, but never quite got enough knowledge to know whether it's really good or not. It says, Last Exit to Brooklyn is a raw depiction of life amongst New York's junkies, hustlers, drag queens, and prostitutes. An unforgettable cast of characters inhabits the housing projects, bars and streets of Brooklyn. A hopeless romantic and tormented transvestite, Georgette. Vinny, a disaffected and volatile youth who has never been on the right side of the law. Tralala, if I'm reading that right, who can find no escape from her loveless existence. Harry, a power-hungry strike leader with a fatal secret. Living on the edge, always walking on the wild side. Nod to Lou Reed there. Their alienation and aggression mask a desperate, deep human need for affection and kinship. This sounds quite front and center in the thing I keep mentioning, and those of you who listen to my videos, thank you very much, will know that I love books that deal with less than perfect people. At my age, I've seen too much of the world to think in terms of black and white. I don't think people are good or bad. I don't think life is that simple. I think we are all, excuse the pun, shades of grey. And I think books like this sound like that they recognize that and they tackle that head on. So I look forward to giving that a try. Next up is Erica Young's Fanny. This has always been a book that it's the kind of book you keep for Garb August. And I've always looked at it and I thought, I wonder if that's actually any good at all, or whether it's just rubbish. And again, at these sort of prices, you can afford to take a little bit of a chance. I have got the earlier novel, Fanny Hill, and I wondered how the two track each other, if there's a relationship, anything like that. And at these prices, I'm prepared to take the risk of finding out. Then a non-fiction book called The Novels of George Eliot by Barbara Hardy. Again, this seems to just be an analysis. When I look at the contents page, it's broken into a few sections: the unheroic tragedy, the tragic process, Adam Bede, the tragic process, the heroines, the tragic process, the egoists, and then it goes into character and form, plot and form, possibilities, the author's voice, and so on. So it looks like something that people who are fond of George Eliot, and I've read both Adam Bede and Middlemarch, I've got the rest to still read, but I thought, again, these are absurd prices, but I thought, yeah, this was 3 South African rands, which is about 15 US cents. So let's do that. Then a copy of J.B. Priestley's An Inspector Calls. It's one of the plays I don't have. I have a shelf full of plays, and I don't have that. It's a very short little play at a very cheap price. So I thought, let me chuck that into the pile. Then a Len Dayton popped up. I have to say, in recent weeks, I've listened to people like Mark at Book Time with Elvis, whose reading experience I really respect. He has been remarking as to how good Len Dayton's writing in the non-fiction area is. And it made me think, if I find more Len Dayton books that are dirt cheap, and this one was, Funeral in Berlin, I thought, why not? Let's chuck it in the pile. This one I'm going to chuck in a different pile, which you can't see. I'll chuck it in a pile that is my Dr. November reading pile. So, yes, it goes there. Then there's a local book called Spud, The Madness Continues. I may have mentioned this in a video before. This Spud is a character who grew up at one of the private schools, the expensive private schools here in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, where I live. Hilton and Michael House are our very posh, expensive private schools where all the politicians' children go, etc., etc. And this is a novel about a kid growing up there that's been a sort of local hit and turned into a film made locally, but interestingly with John Cleese as the headmaster, which brought it international viability. So again, cheap as chips. I thought I'd chuck that into the pile and just see how it goes. I talked about Nick Hornby earlier and how much I liked High Fidelity and how I was going to give Fever Pitch a chance. Here's another of his novels, How to Be Good. And I have heard good things about this. So again, I saw it in the dirt cheap pile and I thought, let's just bring it along. Another non-fiction is a book called Freakonomics. Now, I've heard some people love this, some people disparage it. It's the kind of book where, because of my business career, etc., I'm always tempted to at least know what it's all about. That precludes me from buying it at full price, but when I see it in a bargain basement situation, I think let's just pick it up and have a quick read and see what the fuss is all about and whether I think it's any good to it at all. So there that one is as well. The next one, I said earlier that I'm a sucker for short stories. Here is the Penguin Best Australian Short Stories. Now, I'm aware that apart from the Thornbirds, I don't have a lot of Australian-centric novels or books in my library at all. So I thought, let me start with this. I won't read you the names on the back because, to be honest, I wouldn't know whether they mean anything. None of the names I'm seeing here leap out to me as anything that I would recognize, but maybe that's the point. I have seen online an Australian short story compilation before, but it was obviously at full price. I was tempted, but I thought that's not a good investment of time or money. But here at bargain basement prices, I thought, let me take it on board. I have short stories from a lot of other places around the world, but now I have Australia covered too. So let's see how that goes. I've recently acquired some books by Gore Vidal, the sort of more famous ones, Myra Breckenridge and those sort of things. This is his novel Dulleth, and again I only picked it up because his name jumped out at me. The price literally was 1 South African rand, that is 5 US cents. You can't buy a postage stamp for that. And here was a book with a name of an author that I know and haven't yet experienced properly. So I chucked it in the pile. Again, my sense is that people either love or hate him, but we'll see. Then a book by Doris Lessing, who's a very important South African author, and it's called The Memoirs of a Survivor. It says now a major film starring Julie Christie. I know nothing about this book. It says her most remarkable book, the one which shows her mind at its most extended, original, and astonishing. Now, given that she's written books like The Golden Notebook, that's saying quite something. Time will tell whether I agree with it or not, but it's a slim book, and I thought, anything by Doris Lessing, I'm immediately interested. So it came along. And here's a copy of Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth, which, believe it or not, I don't have in my library. So when I saw it at this price, it's got quite a cute cover. Let me just show you. There's this guy on the front. I'm just trying to avoid the glare. And then if you go around to the back, two of his compatriots are lurking behind with the cave entrance behind them. I'm ashamed to say that when it comes to Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, I'm far more familiar with the rock opera that Rick Wakeman composed, which I know very well and have loved and enjoyed all my life, than in fact the novel itself. But we can put that to rights now. Here it is, in the flesh. I picked up a copy of Tom Sharp's Wilt, which I think I read years and years and years ago, and I thought I would try again. It says, his best novel yet, Mr. Sharp has taken a great stride towards being considered a major craftsman in the art of farce. That comment from Oberon War of the Evening Standard. Okay, it's lunatic stuff, but I remember thinking it was well written and funny. I then picked up a novel by Michael Ondaatje called Anil's Ghost, which I know nothing about, but of course, as the book is quick to remind us at the bottom, Michael Ondaatje is the author of The English Patient. I loved the film of The English Patient because it was with Ralph Fiennes and Kristen Scott Thomas, and I'm a complete Kristen Scott Thomas fan. She can do no wrong. I just absolutely adore her in everything I've seen her in. There are a couple of them out there. Jamie Lee Curtis is another one, but Kristen Scott Thomas, I think is just a very, very skilled actress who just embodies parts, and I can't sing her praises high enough. I love The English Patient, mainly because of Kristen Scott Thomas, and when I saw this book at ridiculous prices, I thought, if his first novel was good, maybe the rest are good as well. Then another local author, Pamela Ewerster. She's most famous for her book, Dance with a Poor Man's Daughter. This is called Frida and Mia. It's about two girls growing up in South Africa on the wrong side of the tracks. It says here, Min and no, not Mia, it's Min. Frida and Min. Sorry, I mispronounced that. In a way, Min and Frida were both outsiders. Min, raised in the bush by her idealistic doctor father, and Frida, daughter of a poor Jewish saxophone player who lived almost on top of a native neighborhood. The two girls thrown together, the white, and they use the K word, which I'm not going to say, and the poor Jewish girl, formed a strange but loyal friendship, a friendship that was to last through the terrible years of oppression and betrayal during the time of apartheid in South Africa. Those books are always interesting. This country has this terrible history, but from that terrible history emerge incredible opportunities for wonderful storytelling of every possible stripe from every possible angle of the struggles, and a lot of very good books emerge, and I hope that's going to be one of them. I picked up a copy of a Dom DeLillo novel that I've never heard of called Mao 2. It clearly is him in the picture there, Chairman Mao. Dom DeLillo, of course, is much better known for his other novels, but this one I'd never heard of, and I thought, again, at these silly prices, I'm prepared to chuck that in the pile and see if it's any good. Then, although I'm not a royalist, and if you push me, I do think we're all created equal and we should be treated equal, I have to confess that having grown up with parents who were very fond of the British royal family, and I became very impressed with the duty approach of the Queen herself, perhaps less so some of her offspring. I picked up a book here called On Duty with the Queen, Dickie Arbiter. Dickie was spokesman for the Queen during the most turbulent period of her reign. Okay, so he was part of the PR team. I just thought it would be an interesting perspective behind the curtain in a family who lives by the mantra of never apologize, never explain. Perhaps until recently, events in the news right now as we talk are proving me wrong, but times certainly change as the royals try and modernize in order to survive as relevant. We've heard this story before, but here's another John le Carré that I didn't own, The Little Drummer Girl, priced at 1 single South African rand, which is 5 US cents. I just can't leave that behind. Sorry. Okay, the big bag continues to offer up more. This was interesting. This is a book by Graham Boynton called Last Days in Cloud Cuckoo Land. And the blurb on the back says, anyone who thinks that the ANC are going to run the government of South Africa is living in cloud cuckoo land. This was Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher of the UK in 1987, and less than 10 years later, that's precisely what was happening. And Graham Boynton appears to have been one of the journalists who covered the final days of the previous government in South Africa ahead of the democratic change and the elections. And from a historical point of view, that's got to be very interesting. Perhaps only to us locals, but anyway, I would think that's going to be a very interesting book to read. Next up is a novel called a Hollywood novel called By Design by Richard E. Grant. You'll see him there on the back if you can't remember who Richard E. Grant is. I have a soft spot for Richard E. Grant. He's a son of Africa. He was born in Swaziland, but obviously he's gone on to international fame and fortune in Hollywood. And I like his, whenever I hear him in interviews, I'm always impressed with his humanity and his perspectives. So I thought I'd give his novel a try. You may know him from iconic films like Whitnall and I, things like that. I don't have a copy of Shuggie Bain, which won the Booker Prize in 2020. I thought I like to have copies of the Booker Prize winners because most of them I've tried, including my friend Damon Galgut with The Promise, have all turned out to be really, really good reading experiences. So that jumped into the pile. Another big one coming out, Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. This is one of those books a little bit like Infinite Jest, where people talk about it and you really don't know whether it's going to land or be a hit or a miss. This one was priced at 15 South African Rand, which is 75 US cents. I thought at that price, it can come home and I can take my time and explore it and decide whether it's for me or whether it's not. Equally, I found here, priced at 5 Rand, which is 25 US cents, Herman Wouk's The Winds of War in a nice solid hardcover version. I have a rather battered old cheap second-hand paperback copy, but it's a big book and it is a book that I'm very fond of. I first encountered The Winds of War as the television series when I was growing up, and I've always been curious to read it in the form that Herman Wouk wrote it rather than the television adaptation. So now I can for next to nothing. That came along. And last but not least of the entire book haul is this book by R.W. Johnson called South Africa's Brave New World, the Beloved Country Since the End of Apartheid. R.W. Johnson is a very interesting academic who does a lot of writing about South Africa. He is from the UK originally, but he spent the bulk of his life in South Africa, and he's married a Russian woman who is also an academic and writes in very intelligently about the relationship between South Africa and Russia, which is extremely interesting for those of us who want to understand the political dynamics and what happens next. I've always liked R.W. Johnson's forthright, unambiguous writing. He calls a spade a spade. He's not fooled or deflected by political rhetoric. He's very direct, and his analysis I have always found to be very accurate and very fact-based. So, wow, That's a lot of books. How many? Let's do a little count. Okay. Hold on to your hats. I got 54 books for $20. I paid an average of 37 US cents for 54 books. So that's my contribution to the Read What You Own book buying bans season of Booktube. You tell me which of these books I should have left behind at these ridiculous prices. As I said in a recent video, one of the nice things about visiting our local SPCA is that you feel you're getting a chance to rescue animals. Perhaps I did a bit of book rescuing too. Books that don't get bought end up in the pulping machine. And at these prices, 54 books. And I'm out of pocket. If I was the US, I'd say $20. In local currency, it's less than 400 Rand. It's really a pittance. And it's brought into my reading renaissance ambit a whole lot of opportunities. So, sorry, not sorry. It does, of course, stretch the TBR. Don't get me wrong, I'm not at all against people imposing short-term book buying bans on themselves. It's great. But I just think as I chart my way in my reading renaissance journey, I want to find the good books. I want to make sure that my TBR is constantly being reprioritized so that each book I decide to read next is a good reading experience and a good investment of the limited time we have. As Steve always reminds us, there's so many books, so little time. So that's my justification. Tell me in the comments whether you have some sympathy for my approach. Either way, I'd like to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this book haul and unboxing to some extent, please do leave us a like and subscribe. It does help. It does definitely help the channel get the attention of the YouTube algorithm, which obviously brings me to more people if you'd feel inclined to do that. In any event, that's the end of this video. So thank you, Booktube, for sharing the journey with me, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.